I hope you're having a good summer. I hope you're happy. I hope you're just really tickled right now. Y'all look sleepy. I don't know what that's about. Because I didn't see any of you on the road last night at 11 o'clock, so I don't know why you're sleepy. I don't know why you're not smiling. This is a good summer. It's been hot this week, but there have been years it's been 100 degrees in May, and then we suffered all the way through August. And have we had a 100-degree day yet, John? 4 in a row now. So this is the hot week then. It's getting John. This is his season. 102 tomorrow. Okay. We'll take 93 today. Yay. Did everybody get an outline today? Shannon ran late too, so we had to throw that together at the last minute and get them to you. We've been talking about the rhythms of life. One of the reasons I'm having a great summer is because I have enjoyed preaching the Psalms this summer more than ever in my life. And I don't know if I'm doing good or bad or if there's any such thing. I don't have any idea. But I know it's been fun. It's been fun to research these sermons and to just sort of find stories that pick up on what I think that each psalm, at least in me, it contacts a sort of a rhythm of things. And so I hope you've enjoyed them too. Today is from Psalm 51. There's only 2 or 3 more of these in the series. We'll be through by the end of August, and there's a youth Sunday coming up at the end of August too. So I've only got a couple more of these to go. But today comes from Psalm 51, and this is, if you follow the Psalms or know the Psalms very well, this is David's lament. This is the psalm where David, as you know, King David. Wow, okay. Sometimes they just play themselves. They just start right up, So this is King David, the man after God's own heart, after he has committed a grievous sin, the sin of murder, the sin of adultery, even stealing away the wife of another man. And David writes this psalm out of lament. Okay? I want to read this as we begin. Here we go. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. According to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you and you alone have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified in your sentence and blameless when you pass judgment. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived me. You desire truth in the inward being. Therefore, teach me wisdom in my secret heart. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain in me a willing spirit. So when I was a kid, there was this saying that went around. There are 2 things that are the only times that almost counts. Do you remember what it is? Horseshoes and hand grenades. Almost counts in horseshoes. If you play horseshoes, you get close. It's a point, right? And of course in hand grenades, where you don't have to be that accurate. Esteban might think about that. We've all qualified him as a shot with a handgun. He says if he pulls it out, don't worry. If he hits you, it'd be by accident. So maybe hand grenades will work better for you, Esteban. Just if you get it in the room, that's good enough. So horseshoes and hand grenades. But my generation, we were uncouth. We were the golden children, the little brothers and sisters of all you hippies. And so we just kept things going for you. We came up with one more: horseshoes, hand grenades, and getting girls pregnant. Almost counts. Because if you go to Dad and say, we thought she was, but it turns out she's not, you still have a problem. Are you with me? You still have a problem. So we would add to that list. What we're talking about, though, are unforgivable sins, right, dads? I mean, that's what we're talking about. What are the unforgivable sins? What are the things where almost will get you in more trouble than you can get out of? And the question is, what can God forgive? And what can God not forgive? I remember a time of confession, and it was based around that third qualifying piece right there. I remember when I was dating my very first wife, and yes, I've been married more than once. It's not a happy story, but it's a true story. But while we were dating, once we became engaged, we did what so many young couples did in the 70s and still today, but we became sexually active. And then along the way, the relationship got complicated. Did you know, fine adults that I'm speaking to today, that many times when we hurry that step in relationship building, when real problems come, they tend to challenge us in a way that we're not ready for. And so there we were, finding out that we didn't really know if we wanted to be married, and finding out that she was pregnant. Now that's going to be a tough situation. Some of you found yourself in that before. She's pregnant and we're not sure we want to get married anymore. Then she says, no, I don't think I do want to get married. So now I've got the task of telling my grandparents what I didn't want to tell them. It was enough to tell them I'm engaged to be married, because their response to that wasn't, well, they didn't plan a shower right away, okay? They weren't real tickled to hear their 18-year-old, not so mature grandson had decided to get married. But when I sat down with my grandfather to tell him what I had done, the shame, the guilt, the burden of that was so heavy on me that I almost couldn't get the words out. I knew I was about to disappoint this person who expected so many good things from me, who had always done good things for me. I have to tell you, I was very surprised at my grandfather's response to my confession. Do you know that he loved me so much that he began right away to assign blame for this situation on the other party and not on me? Surely it was her fault. Surely she should have said no. You're a guy and you naturally would ask, but she should have said no. You see, I don't think my grandfather meant to be a judgmental person, but I think that the product of the generation in which he grew up in and the fact that he wanted to protect his grandson made him say these things, but they didn't do good things for me. They made me think that, well, because I was a guy, it was all right. Blameless, baby. Yeah. You know what my part was. I got to tell you, though, that was the hardest confession I've ever made. And I think it's because I believed my own press going into the story. I believed the things that they had taught me without meaning to. That sex was something that was really dirty. And that it was okay for me somehow, but not for her. And I believed all those things so that it complicated the confession. I wonder what kinds of things that we believe about ourselves. That's my story. My grandmother was a blue blood Georgia Belle. There were things you didn't talk about. But what is your story? What are the things you believe about yourself? You know, Mark Twain had a great saying. He said, if three people call you, or if one man, I'm sorry, let me back up. If one man calls you an ass, Mark Twain said, pay him no mind. But if three men call you an ass, go out and buy a saddle. What are the things that we've heard over and over about ourselves that we didn't know we had grown to believe, or perhaps they wounded us in some way and we have struggled with that wounding. When I went on my men's rites of passage, there was an exercise there in which we were asked to remember all of those things. What are the things that were said to you, maybe by your father, maybe by your mother, maybe by a grandparent or a relative, maybe a coach, maybe a teacher, maybe a preacher or a Sunday school teacher, someone you looked up to? What are the things that they said to you that shaped who you would become? What did you believe about yourself? And it's not all good. On the MROP, they asked us to recall the things that had wounded us. What was it that was said to you that caused you to believe less about yourself? And then once we had recalled those, they asked us to be willing to say them out loud in a gauntlet of sorts, where we shouted these insults that had been given to us to men who went through a line. Two of us facing inside, shouting at every man who came through the line the insults that had made us believe horrible things about ourselves. And so there I heard men say things like, "You are a total screw up. You will never amount to anything. What's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You must be stupid. You must be gay. You must be just no good from the core. Worthless. Come on." We've all heard it. Perhaps some haven't. So there I shouted all the things that had wounded me. The next morning, it was really kind of neat because a man came up to me at breakfast and he said, "I need to thank you, brother." And I said, "Thank me for what? I don't even know this man." And he said, "Last night when we came through the gauntlet, when I got to you, you were shouting at me so loud and your face was so red and the veins were standing out in your neck." And I said, "Yeah, I was getting rid of that stuff, man. I was dumping it." And he said, "Well, I needed it. I needed it. I needed to see that. I needed to hear that. And you freed me from the things that wounded me just by seeing that and hearing you say that." It's letting go of things that have harmed us, wounded us, and caused us to believe less about ourselves than we are. And it's not just letting go, but it's actually transforming the pain. It's actually rewriting your own story, changing your own history, giving purpose to things that were done to you, transforming pain, and not only for yourself, but for the benefit of others and for the community around you. And the community could use some of that. Because the community, culturally, I think, are in a bigger business of wounding people than we are in healing wounds and transforming pain. We talk about the pipeline to prison, where kids very early in school get told this is who you are, and they fall right into line. And in some ways, I want to say that the African American community wants to make it a black and white issue, but it's not. And it's not a brown and white issue. It's really a poverty issue, because the pipeline to prison begins with the pipeline to poverty. And when you tell people you are poor and I am not, they accept that position in society and they continue forward. Folks, y'all aren't being fooled by presidential candidates who just have a lot of money, are you? You're really listening for wisdom, and you're really listening for maturity in people, right? You wouldn't just be impressed with someone who just had a whole lot of money but had no sense of maturity or no sense of respect, right? I mean, if you... No comment. Then you're fired. Because you don't have to be smart to have a lot of money, okay? And I'm not saying that people with money are all not smart. I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't qualify it that way. There's cultural woundings. The pipeline to prison and into poverty, when we tell people they don't belong. When you take a kid in the second grade and you put him over here in another classroom and say, "Sit here by yourself, we'll bring you a sandwich at lunchtime because you can't eat with the rest of the kids." I want to know that he carved his name in a desk or set the classroom on fire. not that he didn't know how to do his homework. And I want you to know the staggering percentage of those kids who go straight to the county jail within the first 5 years of their adult life. Because we told them, that's who you are. And then they come home and they ask Mom and Daddy, is it true? I'm telling you, Mom and Daddy work their butts off sometimes trying to say, no, it's not true. But you're just one voice in a crowd of voices who say you don't belong. Whenever one girl is told you are beautiful, then a host of other women are told you don't measure up. When one person is told you are the smartest one in the class, a whole bunch of other people are told you don't measure up. We are continuing to culturally wound our children. We do it out of our own wounds because we have not transformed them and let them become sacred. The Singoi people in the book Original Wisdom had a few practices that sort of picked up a rhythm to life that we may have lost. One of them was they never shouted at each other, probably not even in a sermon, so I stand guilty today. They never shout at one another. Shouting is a sin, and to shout at someone else is not only a sin on you, but it causes the person you shout at to sin. You just don't do that. And in terms of raising children, they said that after about 3 years of age, they no longer gave the children instruction. They simply watched and made sure they didn't hurt themselves, but allowed them to experience their world around them, their life, and their context. In the Singoi way, people belong. Everyone belongs. It is the thief. He is not one who we put away. When they encounter thieves in Western culture, among the original people on the Malaysian islands, they say that person should be locked up. He's a thief. And the response is, your culture calls him a thief and locks him away. Our culture calls him one of us. The dying person, the sick person, the thief, the crazy woman. These are part of our community. God has given them to us. They belong here. Of course, life is simpler in the Singoi jungles of Malaysia. When you only own 3 shirts and 4 pots for cooking, it's a lot easier to deal with thieves. They can only rearrange things. They really can't take anything. Life is far more complicated here in West Texas and in our own context, even right here in our church. I'm so amazed when people say, I left something here and it's gone. And I thought, no one at church would take it. Boy, they wouldn't. They would think you left it for them. So, yay. If you want to hang on to it, don't leave it here. And if it's chocolate, the pastor will get it. So, most Native American tribes, this is really current. This is current events in action. Most Native American tribes, when they encountered people whose gender lines were not as clear as others, in other words, an effeminate man or an overly masculine woman who in our culture might be labeled in some other way and might actually represent another community. But in Native American cultures, those people weren't ostracized or called wrong or gay or flawed or anything else. They were thought of as little demigods on earth because, you see, they understood God, or the Great Spirit. And by the way, the Great Spirit was sort of God, not the buffalo, not the deer, but the Great Spirit who gave life to the buffalo and the deer. And for them, the Great Spirit, like the Hebrew people understood, had no gender. But it wasn't that God was male or female. God was beyond that. God would have encompassed all gender, not no gender. And so it was that when people came along that didn't define the gender lines according to the status quo, they were elevated to a position in their culture of representing something greater than even themselves, who were clearly one or the other. In our culture, it's not quite that simple. Out of fear and threat, we often tell people that they are inappropriate, that they make us nervous. And it may not be just gender lines. It may be their choice of theology or religion. It may be skin color. I'm telling you, if I walk into a movie theater and one of you are in there with your gun to protect everyone else in the theater, I'm leaving because I don't trust any of you. We tell people who they are and define it, and then they want to believe it. If you tell folks long enough that they're going to hell, any of you guys in my generation want to finish this one for me? If you tell us long enough that we're going to hell, what did we do, folks? We started living just like that's what we were going to do, did we not? How many of y'all walked out of a church sometime around 1975 to 79 because somebody there told you, you're just going to hell? And how many of you took 67? You're just way ahead of everybody else. So when we get there, John will already be there waiting on us. They told him first. If you tell people long enough that that's who they are, they'll start living like that. Did you realize that? Yeah. Wonder what else we could tell them. Well, I've gotten off track, haven't I? We started off talking about what is an unforgivable sin. We've gotten all the way to people going to hell now. What is an unforgivable sin? What can God not forgive? You know, we get kind of scared about that. There's a rhythm to life, knowing that I'm not going to live this thing without messing it up or doing something wrong. I'm doing the quotation marks around wrong. All you who I pick on for dualism are coming after me right now. But I want to say something to you again that I hope you've heard this summer. To grieve the spirit of forgiveness can be an unforgivable sin. But take heart. What is not possible for men is possible with God. Don't ever believe you can tie God's hands in terms of that. But know this, you can do things here that have a lifetime lasting effect. Take, for example, the sin of murder. I don't believe the sin of murder is unforgivable in God's kingdom, and in God's mind and in God's heart. But in this world, it is certainly an irreparable and irreversible sin. You take a life, you cannot restore it or give it back. And how many people have been taken to their own deaths as a form of punishment for that, only to find a family sitting in a viewing room waiting for transformational healing to come by witnessing another death. And it just doesn't happen. Because some things are unforgivable in this world. Please be very careful. Jesus said, you know that murder is a terrible sin. I think Jesus might have even been saying, you know it's irreversible. You know this is something you can't repair. And then he said, you failed to recognize that when you use words, raka, he said, which is a way of saying you're dead to me. You do not exist. When you use words that tear people down and tell them you don't belong, you don't measure up. You're not as smart. You're not as pretty. You make people nervous. You make people uncomfortable. When you do those things, then you are telling them you're dead. And sometimes those things become unforgivable. Be very careful with your words. Often I've encountered families going through a crisis, and my advice has been this: don't say too many things right now that you're going to have to apologize for later. Words are fashionable weapons, and they're used over and over to keep people in their place. As to what is forgivable and unforgivable here, and what is forgivable and unforgivable in God's realm, God lives beyond the dualism. When I titled this sermon, When We Are Afraid We've Done Wrong, it's because in God's world, if wrong actions move us toward salvation, I don't know how to qualify it. I don't know how to buy into it. I don't get it. In this world, there are things that should not be said and should not be done. in the name of God and the name of Scripture. Well, let's boil it down to 3 points. That's what we're looking for every week, right? In terms of your behavior and sin and things that happen in life, I want you to know something that you have said to me over and over, and I agree with. Everything happens for a reason. Okay? That doesn't mean everything happens for a purpose. And I think that's what you thought you meant. Everything happens for a reason because sometimes we just do stupid things. It doesn't make us stupid people. It just means we did something and there was a reason why we did it, but it might not be purposeful. Everything happens for a reason, and it's not all by God's design. Sometimes it is our own choices, but everything takes on purpose when we allow God to take those things and transform our pain and transform us toward loving and including others. When I say there are some things that shouldn't be said and shouldn't be done, I'm not talking about your sinful little ways. I'm talking about the way we judge and the way we size up others in order to make ourselves feel better. For things to have purpose, we need to claim that purpose and stop putting it off on God. Certainly God caused or let this happen for a reason. No. The second thing is that wounds should always be sacred. There's no one who escapes without being wounded. Life is that way. It's indiscriminate. But wounds should always be sacred. Wounds should be sacred enough that they heal not only us, but those around you. The psalmist would say, "Create in me a new heart, O God." Jesus would say, it is necessary for you to be born again from above, a new way of seeing, a new way of perceiving. And the ultimate, the end result of both of those actions is a joy in our salvation, a joy in who we are in God, and a joy in who we are just the way we've been created to be. And the third thing is this. If you are created in the image of God, then why would you believe any of those other things that anyone tried to tell you? There's one created in the image of God, sitting alone in a cubicle, sweating and chewing the eraser off the end of a pencil. That's going to turn into a syringe in about 5 or 6 years. That's a true story. And it's not just mine, is it? There's the one that's been told, "You're no good." There's one created in the image of God breaking into a pharmacy or someone's house. There is one created in the image of God choosing to run over someone in a parking lot for not purchasing alcohol for them. Probably because they've seen it done thousands of times on a video game where they just pop right back up and keep going. I'm sure that that doesn't have any effect on young people's behavior, although I'm curious as to why they train pilots in simulators. There's one created in the image of God, giving herself away to abusive men over and over. Because every man in her life abandoned her life. If your daughter's not talking to you, don't stop talking. I got one too. I got one who hadn't spoke to me in 4 years. Probably really gets on her when she gets a card on her birthday. Daddies that disappear cause a lot of problems. Don't do that. Even if they choose that, don't you do that. Gosh, even John Mayer knows that one, right? You don't have to have Jesus or King David for that. There is one created in the image of God who's doing whatever he has to do to raise money. Why would I want a job making $5 an hour, he said to me, when I can make $500 a day by just making a little bit of this? That wasn't my son, by the way. I don't think he ever made $500 a day. Be careful. Be careful what you say to others. Be careful what you believe about yourself, because you are sons and daughters of God, created in that image with all of that potential. And if you are, that means that whoever else you encounter today is too. Exactly the same. Would you pray with me now?